So this little coaching and practice setup is one which is kind of a go-to for me. It's something that I use a great deal, and the reason I use it is because first of all, it's so simple to set up, and because the versatility and the adaptability of the practice scenario is so broad that you can almost hone in on pretty much anything within this practice scenario, perhaps with the exception of even with to a degree goalkeeping. But it's a super versatile methodology. Let me first of all show you the setup. So we've got 4 coned areas. You see, we've got a red square here, or sort of scoring zone. Orange we have the same, yellow we have the same, blue we have the same. Now you can make them all the same colour, it doesn't really matter, but here it just helps to kind of visualise, and you'll see why in a second. We have 2 teams. In this case, the yellow and the reds. We got approximately 5 versus 5. I say approximately because you could do 4 versus 4. You could do up to 7 versus 7, I suppose. Obviously, just be aware that the greater numbers that you have within this scenario, the fewer touches and individual development is going to come for each individual that's playing with regard to technical improvement and repetition. Now, what we can start to think about then is what are the kind of the format and the rules. So the basic format as follows. Okay, so if this player, for example, plays this ball, and they play this ball into here. This ball goes into here, look. Okay, so the ball ends up there. And this player successfully passes that ball out to one of their teammates in this kind of format. So if they pass out successfully in that way, and this player here receives the ball, that player there receives the ball, then what we end up with is we have a situation where we've scored a point. Okay? Now, so what does that mean? It means that the ball has to be received within one of these 4 scoring zones. It then has to be successfully passed out for the point to score. Now I want to be clear here. It is scored when a successful receipt of the pass occurs by the receiver, effectively the third player in the triangle. Again, starting to think about what this can be used for. The third player in the triangle is the one that scores the goal. So we are rewarding either the third man run or the triangular format or the diamond shaped passing. We are actually rewarding that type of behaviour. The next rule I'd introduce to you is that once that happens, we can't have a situation where this pass gets made and then another pass gets made into here for a repeat goal in this case, in this orange area. No, that can't happen. Once the team has scored in that orange goal, they have to look for something which might be actually wouldn't be from that player, it would be from this player. They'd have to look for something like a ball into here. And of course, what's going to happen there is that then this player is going to then come and try and receive that ball, and perhaps they then try and pass out to here, for example. That would be a perfectly legitimate pass. So the reason being is you can't score twice into the orange goal, say, or any other in 2 consecutive moves. That, of course, assumes that the ball has not been touched or won back by the red team. A couple of other points I'd make before we kind of get into the adaptability and the versatility of this practice. You might want to notice here there is no external area. I'm just actually going to zoom out for a second. We've got effectively a half pitch here, but there's absolutely nothing stopping this player from really dropping off and opening, for example, this angle. Okay, that is effectively good play. He's killing or taking this player out. Unless this player gets pulled out, what happens then? We create space in the middle. Again, you might want to notice with your players, or players you might want to be thinking about, how do you create space in this type of environment? You know, to score in the red goal, for example, does this player drop off here, you know, bring in these players towards them, okay, bring in these players down this way, while this player here kind of makes what you might loosely call a looping run into here, so that we can get a pass struck here on that, to receive that ball, okay? And then, of course, we look to pass it out. So you might want to start noticing, coaches and players, you might want to start thinking about how do you actually look to create space in this type of environment, and how do you create scoring opportunities? Again, another classic in this situation would be, you know, that the ball is being progressed into this orange area, and then all of a sudden we get a situation. Maybe there's no player inside. I'm struggling to pick that one. Maybe you know we've progressed. We've been progressing in this way really nicely. Okay, we've been progressing in this way really nicely, but all of a sudden the play kind of gets closed down. We think we're going to score into there, but the play gets closed down. So what do? We turn and we look to play in the other direction, either here or into here. Okay, so that would be a classic example. I mean, look at how this is developing the awareness of your players, that the actual need, not that you're instructing them to keep their heads up and be aware, but they actually need to do it. We often, I think, make a mistake in practice situations where we might coach into players, have your chin up, be looking, be aware. Well, what if the practice itself actually requires them to do that for successful completion of the skill? Well, therefore, the tendency to do it with or without instruction is going to be far, far higher. A couple of points that you want to make. Typical conditions you can apply to this. You can say, right, we've got 2 touches. It's a classic example, right? We could also say, okay, fine. Let's let me put like let me just get an extra player in here. I'm just changing colours. We can say that's not what I meant to do. So we can say, look, this orange player is going to come into the play, and that orange player, I think I've made him a bit of a muddy brown. That orange player plays for both teams, whichever team is in possession. So effectively, you overload the attacking team. That's going to make the tendency for scoring far higher. Equally, you could take that player out. I suppose theoretically, you could make that extra player for the defending team, making the attacking team play much, much harder. Again, be aware here that you've got extra balls on the side. Keep the practice flowing by having those balls there on the side as the coach. Now, you don't want to discourage a player from going to receive the ball there, for example. That, in this context, is actually a good play. You don't want to make it sort of a silly environment, like huge area, but that is creating space in this environment, so in this game. The other point, you might want to substitute, for example, one outfield player, and you might want to make a goalkeeper. And the way you would do this is that the goalkeeper here, they receive the ball as if it was just a normal. It was just a normal environment. They're playing with their feet here, but when they're in this environment, if the ball comes into them here, then the pass has to be from this player. The pass has to be from this player. Bear with me a second, folks. The pass has to be here. It has to be a lofted pass. It has to be caught by the goalkeeper, who then is going to roll that ball out to a teammate's feet. Okay, so we're looking at the movement of the goalkeeper, utilization of the hands, good quality roll and distribution onto the strongest foot, those kind of factors for the goalkeeper. And of course, for the goalkeeper, as they're in the general play, we're utilizing their footwork skills as they need to develop as well in there. Now, again, can I emphasize here that what have I focused on here? I focused on the structure of the practice. This could be as simple as you're looking to develop one single command and communication channel, which is the switch. You could play this entire practice, and the skill you're looking to develop is not that you receive a pass in a square and pass it out, but you score by actually switching play with a command of switch, or whatever it is that you happen to be wanting to develop in here. It's also fitness work. This can be relatively high intensity. Obviously, if you're playing this for sort of 10 to 15 minutes, this is going to become quite tiring, so it's relatively game-like. Now, I also want to look at some limitations of this practice environment. Let's take this player here for argument's sake. We've currently got 10 players in this practice environment. So what's the weakness for this individual? Let's call this player A. Okay, what's the weakness? Well, they're going to have the ball at their feet a tenth of the time on average. Okay, so they're going to have the ball at their feet a tenth of the time. So in terms of technical skill development and repetition, that's relatively limited. So we might not want to do this practice in isolation, but link it together with other individual and pair work before we come into this, or indeed after we come out of this, to get that repetition and technical development within that scenario. Or we may want to do that in other practice scenarios. Another point I would make in here, this is going to be, this is a practice, if we're looking to switch the ball from here, to here, okay, we're talking about people who can kick the ball a certain distance. So for under 6s, under 7s, even under 10s, under 11s, there's limitations to this practice because of, how far they can physically kick a size 4 ball or whatever. So you might want to sort of make the area smaller. You might want to create some conditions like they have to play through the middle, or it has to be short passes, that sort of thing, to work the ball and to get the technical work to work the ball into those areas and back out again. Okay, so there's a couple of factors that maybe limit the practice, but broadly, this is a practice which can develop all kinds of features of players' technique, skill, awareness, communication channels, how they make decisions, their cognitive processing. You might want to sort of add other features in here. For example, you could make this square here yellow and this square here yellow and this one red and this one red. For example, you might say to the players, you have to go yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow, red, and so on. It doesn't matter which one it is. You even allow them to go back into the same one, but it's challenging the cognitive process of the players, and it will also, in that case, of course, encourage things like repeated scoring, switching of play, focus and zonal defending. So it's gonna develop those features depending on how you condition it. But my overall point is there's a super simple practice structure that allows a whole heap of development in different ways. Final point, I've often used this as the last 5 minutes of a warm-up pre-match. Okay, so just 5 minutes. It's the classic possession keep ball drill, but it's got some focus and some cognitive processing involved. So I like to use that. So you can imagine a situation where, you know, maybe we've gone and done it, and we're only working in kind of we've narrowed it down, and maybe we're only working in I don't know, something like this area here. We make the practice only that big. For example, we keep it nice and small, but we work on that with sort of 10 players up in this area while our goalkeepers are still working down. It's probably going to be a bit bigger than that, but you get the idea. We'd have the same practice, but we'd narrow it down into something like that. And then we'd still have the goalkeepers working down here. We could have something like 5 versus 5, 6 versus 6. The classic sort of starting 5 versus 5 of the outfield 10 would be sort of working on this in here. Maybe sub striking the ball, warming up the goalkeeper, preparing, that sort of thing. So there's a couple of possibilities that you can use this as well. I wouldn't use this as the only skill-based work within a warm-up because ultimately there's not enough individual ball work, but you certainly could do a lot worse at the final 5 minutes of warm-up than play a simple game like this. Throw a few cones down and it's beautiful.